Welcome back to today's show, everyone. I'm your host, as always, Charlotte Stebbing-Mills, and today I'm joined by consciousness expert, founder of the White Space, also founder of the Tao and the Art of Loving. Plus, she's an author, energy worker, and psychotherapist. It's the one and only Jyotsna. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy that you are here and happy to be introducing you to our listeners today because you have so much, well, so many different skills and such a beautiful amalgamation of kind of background, experience, qualifications. Obviously, you got your own personal journey in the mix, and it's just you've created such a beautiful thing as a result. So I really can't wait for our listeners to hear more about that. Before they do, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about who you are outside of those kind of titles? Who are you, and how can we get to know you a little bit better?
So, you know how sometimes it's really hard to define something. I kind of feel like it's a paradox. I don't fit in, and yet it's so vast, and yet I love to explore the little nooks and corners of who I be. And I use the word be consciously. So I've always been a seeker, a dreamer. I write poetry. I'm a fitness enthusiast. I have always wanted to go beyond what's visible. And as a kid, you don't really know how to deal with. Yes, I call it a gift. I'm quite blessed to have it. But it takes years of wielding this ability to perceive things and also the desire to follow the gift, right? Because you have to have both. You've got to align your will to the calling. And throughout my life, I've worked in the corporate world. I have studied in marketing and advertising and sales. I have headed teams. I have done work with the finance industry, with the aviation industry. And around 2009, I kind of decided my heart was calling me more than the external world. While again, if you're familiar with the yin yang symbol, which is in every shadow, there's a dot of light, and every light always has a shadow at the back of it, or it also creates the penumbral eclipse kind of formation where it will look at something and that thing transforms, pretty much like sunshine falling on a seed. So the more I sought to learn, the more the person that I was expanded on the inside, and I sought to learn psychotherapy. I've learned numerology. I teach astrology. I do energy healing. I followed my heart through various, like Harry Potter has this platform 934, and there were these little recesses that took me into exploring everything. So even I don't know how to define myself. I don't want to. I don't know what to say to you, except that I just love to be me, for want of a better way to say this. I'm very childish.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I don't think you need to say more than that, because I think your essence of who you are is coming through already. I really want to pick up on well, there's so many things already that I could pick up on, but one thing that you said when you was describing yourself there is you were choosing your language consciously of who am I being, who I be. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, what happens is across the ancient scripts, across wisdom, there is this concept of I am, I exist, existential theosophy, existential philosophy. A lot of it boils down to the concept of life force and identity. The concepts of existence essentially is to experience and turn back in the fold inwards, which is it's a lot like breath if you bring it down to a very simple matter. When you breathe in, a lot happens on the inside. When you exhale, a lot can happen on the outside. You'll always inhale, or you'll always experience much more than that which you choose to allow to fuel or momentum or propel you from the inside out, forwards or further. So when you say I am, that is a powerful, let's say, like you're paying a check. you're issuing a check and you're saying, I am pretty, I am intelligent. You give yourself that amount of investiture to be something. So when you say, I be this, then there's a vaster element of the internal buy-in for where you're putting the force that you're capable of, or what's called your potential outwards into the world that you experience outside. So it's literally, I choose to spend time, life force, energy, heart, will to choose this place to show up and be here. And that aligns with my internal will.
Interesting.
So it's a lot of tuning in inwards.
It's beautiful. I've been a big part of my journey has been that identity piece. Is I think for a lot of people, and really living authentically in the best ways we know how, in this modern world where we can get distracted with who we're not potentially. And big part of that was understanding not what am I doing with my life, but it's who am I being whilst I am doing, or whilst I am now serving rather than doing. And just those shifts, it has allowed me to really embody my idea of who I be. And it's been incredibly helpful. So I love that description that you've just shared. That's absolutely beautiful. Really powerful, and it's just a small linguistic thing really as well when we think about it that we can start to think about.
The thing is, and I share this fairly frequently, which is, we have affirmations, you have what are called mantras from the Oriental world, you have neurolingual psychology, you have neurolingual programming, you have all kinds of rational behavioral programming and conditioning. You have scientists doing so much. You have a lot of people seeking. Essentially, people want to create their life, and the whole aspect of creatorship comes not from applying only your mind is very much a tool, but it is 7% of the, or approximately 5 to 6% of the cognitive force that you are capable of when you align with a chosen desire outwards. Now, the thing is, you've got to always tune in inwards where the real fuel of yourself is and say, is this what I really want? And in that, everything that you say matches the energy of who you are on the inside. So when you're speaking from the inside, or what psychology calls the child ego state. Now, many people call it inner child. There's a lot that's been said. But essentially, the child ego state is a space pretty much like the story Emperor's New Clothes. He speaks the truth. And when you speak straight from that spark-like place, like magic, things, that's where true, what's called not manifestation so much, but actualization happens. What you're saying or your word is aligned with the internal energy that you be. And that is when what you say comes true. Much like people sometimes, in a very simple way, people sometimes think of a song, you remember a song, and you're driving down and the radio plays that. Now, the thing is, there is an internal buy-in of what you desire to experience. Or sometimes you look at an apartment and you say, what would it be like to live there? And you don't really use only the 7% or the 5 or 6%. You're out of the 23% of your subconscious, let's say 10% is aligned with that 5 or 6% of your mind. And there you have a magnetic effect, or what's called charisma, where you attract things into motion. It's not just matter molecules. It's also a refined element called koilon, which is without getting too technical, it's how things literally like magic dust that you see. It's not that science can say it's just a fairy tale. It's very real if you look at it from the inside. Perception, which is one of the 4 primary pillars of the subconscious. There are, perception is really when you are present with yourself on the inside as well as outside. For example, if I'm having a conversation with friends at a party, I'm listening, I'm engaging, But I also do what's called active listening, which is registering everything on the inside, including what I'm saying and feeling, as well as what I'm experiencing. And that is very much one of the pillars of perception.
We're going to dive into these pillars for sure very shortly. So let me ask you this first. What is it that stands in the way of us being and really connecting and creating perhaps that magnetic energy? Is there anything really standing in the way other than perhaps ourselves and our own perception? I'd love to hear your insights on that.
You know, at the start of this conversation, I think, I forget the exact words you used, but you said something about, you know, in today's times, it's so easy to look at many things. There are neon lights flashing for your attention.
Yep.
One of the gravest dangers we are in as humans is to forget to check inside. Is this aligned with me? Is this who I be? I see so many people, you know, on social media, and it's such a vast space. Some people want to say their truth. Some people may not be saying their truth. Some people desire to be seen there where they feel unseen the most. And however hard or tough these questions may be to oneself, you ask them. You ask people who are in high performance roles. You ask the person, is that whatever you are saying you desire, are you really desiring that? So, you know, it boils down to true desire. So, for example, if you'll indulge me, there's a mini story that we share sometimes in class, which is I hope I have your permission before I launch into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stories.
So we have, thank you. So we have this mini story. So there's the story of a farmer who's, you know, who's just going about his daily work, and he does his things, and he's overlooking his animals, and he's taking a break in the middle of the day, and he's lying back against a haystack, and, you know, see it almost semi-siesta. And somebody comes to the village who's like a modern business person, etc., and has a chat with him and says, do you own all of this? He says, yeah. He says, so I believe you're doing well. And he says, yeah, I'm doing okay. And then he says, why don't you want to you know, earn more? So he says, what will I do with that? He says, I can tell you how. So he says, okay, you tell me. So he says, you know, you buy more land, then you take a loan, then you expand production, then you get more animals, and so on and so forth. And then the farmer asks him, okay, then. So he says, then you'll make more money. Then the farmer asks him, okay, then. So he says, you'll live a better life. So the farmer says, how? He says, you'll relax easily and let things happen. So the farmer looks at him and says, but I'm doing that right now too. So, you know, the quantity of what we desire as an assuagement of what we feel is a perceived vacuum, much what a need is created. You've got to take a reality check and say, do I need 20 apartments to make me feel healthy and so wealthy? What is true wealth to us in today's times? What is the desire aligned towards? What are we as humanity looking? Are we looking to expand ourselves? There's a saying by one of the greatest teachers of modern energy healing. His name is Master Choa was, and he's passed on. But, you know, I spent a long time learning pranic healing and the science of what's called erotic yoga behind it. And there was a quote that stuck with me for a really long time. He said, spirituality and materialism are like two wings of a bird. You need both to fly. I can only look towards existential questions. I can be more aware once I have food on my table. But like, at what point of time? And similarly, I've also done a lot of searching answers. And, you know, at some point of time, you say, how much do I need to sit and enjoy a cup of tea or a conversation with a friend, or listen to a podcast where I can say, oh, yeah, that sounds cool, or that's interesting. You know, I mean, it's a simple space. So I think as humans, consciousness comes when you stop the external seeking and understand that everything that you require comes to you also when you sit still within who you are. And that is where I feel a lot of people get rubbed raw from the inside, especially in modern times. I'm sorry to say that. And you're looking for it externally. If I watch 3 movies, maybe I can say, hey, I'm a critic, I'm a movie critic, and that defines me as identity. Identity is really external, like a coat that you wear in winter. It's really who you are at home with yourself, or like the home on your back is your skin. If you're comfortable at home or safe in your skin, or comfortable in your skin, then you're a joy to be with everywhere. That is wealth.
That's really beautifully said. It's funny because I can really resonate with that, because I think the first time I felt that sense of just peace and just complete at ease, I would describe it as, it almost felt strange because I hadn't felt it before, but it was an incredible feeling. And then it was just like, wow, what does any of this even matter? Like, and it wasn't any specific thing that had happened. It was just a moment in time. And I think in that moment, nothing specific happened, but there was a big shift within me that really helped me to see and understand that both of those wings do matter, the spiritual side and the materialism side. But walking that path consistently, that I think is an art form, and I'm still learning that, because there are parts of me where I can sometimes sway one way to the other, not as extreme as perhaps what I have before, but staying on that path, and I know our audience can probably relate to that, can sometimes be tricky. So what role does our consciousness play in keeping that balance, would you say?
Well, are you familiar with the term miasma?
No, tell me.
Okay, so miasma is a bit like a bubble, right? So all of us, I'm not sure how technical I should get, but just humor me. Well, it's a bit like we all live in together in what's called a collective consciousness, and then we all have our individual consciousness, or like what's called an aura, but it's much bigger than that. It's your thoughts, emotions, energies. It's like a body that is invisible at this point of time to humans, but there's a certain, science calls it thought patterns, beliefs, what you define as your ego. There's an id, there's an ego, there's a superego. So ego, or what's called normal identity, your brand value in today's times. So we all believe, let's say I believe I can be quite helpful, and I know that, and I believe it, or I believe sometimes that I'm extremely fortunate. Whenever I go looking for parking, I find it. Now that consciousness creates it. I have a friend who says, whenever I go to a hotel, they always upgrade me. And I would love to be that also. So I have this little belief, which is in my energy field. It's literally like you have solid, liquid, gas, you have density, you have vapors, you have essences, you have aura emanations, your emotions trigger things around you. It's like, for example, when you wake up in the morning sometimes, and there's like a bit of a juggernaut effect of how good you are, or challenging your day maybe for some people.
Yep.
So yeah, sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, no, carry on.
Yeah. So what?
Attentive right now. I'm forgetting that this is even a podcast interview.
So what happens is that bubble is your background noise to you. And the Johari window is something we can speak about. So that background noise is literally like a camper van that you live in, visible or invisible, depending on where the awareness level of seeking has gone through in this lifetime. And you walk about with that. So for example, as a psychotherapist, we are trained to listen very actively. We're also trained to listen more, in some cases, more to the background than what's being said. So for example, somebody will be telling you their story, and then they may not be aware of it, but they'll say, but I always fail, or I always find a parking spot, or I always ask for a discount, or I don't feel so good about myself, I'm always screwing up. Sorry, excuse the language. I'm always messing up. Yep. So we spot that, and that is this person's larger canvas that they come with as like their background screen. And when you're meeting somebody, they have their own perceptions and filters. And this is where engaging with consciousness, you are a particular background, You take that with you, what you believe on the inside, no matter what you project on the outside, that the other person or the people that you're engaging with also have their own stuff, but they're also energetically sensitive somewhere. And that is where we engage with each other everywhere we go. Now, when this happens, if you as a human being continue to choose, I am not lucky at finding a job, or this always happens to me, or I'm not good enough, I must buy a wig of long black hair to look good. And all these things, it's not wrong or right, because there is also pain associated before and after with this. But all these things that we carry about as our bubble of belief, at least at this 5 or 6% or 7% of the mind, is our cognitive consciousness created. Fortunately, we have a much larger subconscious. Fortunately, there is, for those who believe, a certain wellness aspect everywhere enveloping this place. And we engage with wellness, and that is always like any physical or metaphysical, very, very functional law of nature. It always flows like pressure from higher levels to lower levels. So there where there is a dip in self, there's always an inner font of wellness which emerges from the inside out. And we engage with that, and we learn willy-nilly to really get into a better space. The thing is, and it boils down to very simplistically this: what feels good to you? What is your sense of heart? If, for example, we've had a conversation which is, sitting at home with a pet or a child or a parent or a companion or your partner, and saying, today I'm grateful for having this cup of coffee with you or this conversation, and I know this is where I'm at, and I feel seen here. The thing is, and that's a big one of consciousness, what you see, what you seek. The two of them, when they engage with each other, is your consciousness on the inside, which is literally the path that you've traveled based on the choices that you choose. Do I choose to feel sad for myself and so play the winning game at losing? And I know this is harsh. A lot of people find this very harsh, but the wake-up call must come if you really want to get up and say, I'm not doing that to myself again. Nobody's going to say, no, you poor thing, and then empower you with that.
Yeah, exactly. I love the way you've described that. I see this, and so we've spoken about this podcast and with some of our workshops and clients that we work with, is like an energy bubble, is to imagine that we have this energy bubble around us, like you've just described. I always get people to imagine the big zorbing balls. Have you seen those, where you can run in the big plastic balls like down a hill and things? But basically, we've all got this big ball around us, and we have the capability to deflate that ball based on our thinking and our actions and our behaviors, and whether our heart is open or not, and we have the ability to expand that ball wider and wider, and the more expansive our ball becomes, the more we can influence those around us. Is that like another way of saying what you just did? Is there something missing within that? Because I'm seeing the parallels there, and it feels right to me, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything that you've shared.
More or less, but the thing is, the ball that you carry, again, paradoxically, it's like this: there's a point of light inside. You look at that point, or you wake up that point of self, and you say, and you share it, let's say, and your relationship with yourself is your relationship with the person that, or the people that you're closest to, or even your task. In that point of light, when you see yourself, it is literally magnified outside, and that is your circle of influence. It's the mistake most humans make, is they look for it outside. So when your ball of consciousness, or the influence that you wish or desire, when you desire to be seen in direct proportion to that bit or that space in you which still needs, or like a vacuum, it is waiting, it's not a vacuum. That the influence that you desire on the outside is actually a polar inverted opposite to how much you're seeing yourself on the inside.
Mm.
The more you see yourself on the inside, the better your equation with yourself, the better the equation and partnerships with tasks as well as people is mirrored around you, the clearer your environment or your ecosystem that flourishes with you. It nurtures you when you look at on the inside. And as a result, people get drawn to that which is wellness. They do not get drawn to that which is not, unless they're not healthy themselves or they're not healthily seeking. In which case, it's easy to have any number of people looking at you. Depends what you're looking at to be seen by. Who sees you is very much a part of who you see within yourself.
Which makes so much sense, tying it back to what you said earlier, that where we perhaps might be going not wrong, but perhaps astray with this modern world and some of the, the mechanisms of it these days, is that we're not looking inside. But we're forgetting that that's even a possibility in many ways.
It's like I want a gold Porsche, and I want a gold Ferrari, and I want to buy 3 buildings in a day. And what am I going to do with that? I'm going to feel good. Who's your best friend? Have you called them today? Have you had a nice breakfast today? Are you feeling good in your body? Are you cared for at home? Have you said hi to mom and dad or best friends? Are you loved and cherished by your partner? So those are the things. And that is the health that unfortunately humans are looking for in perhaps places that can do better.
Yeah.
Or symbiotically speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look inside, look
It
inside
is.
that.
The same message comes through, regardless of like if just using this podcast example, the amount of guests we've had, like the common theme always comes back to keep it simple. What makes you feel good? And is that coming from the inside, or are we seeking it outside? It's just such a common theme, and it doesn't cease to surprise me anymore. But every different walk of life and different experience that people have had, like our guests that have come on, even the people like in our reality as well, like the physical reality that are here with us, not through virtual, are experience saying the same thing. And like, we can't all be wrong. We can feel the benefits of that wellness, right? But how do you help somebody see that when then on the other side of it is the challenge, I guess.
The thing is, you don't help anybody until they're willing to ask for help.
Yeah.
You can't rescue or fix anybody.
Right.
If they're willing to sit, all you can do is sit with them in the pit,
yeah.
Hold their hand while they go through it, their own stuff and clear it. The will to clear what's not working for you must come from within. Yeah. It's the only tool that's required.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jyotsna, tell us about the Johari window that you've mentioned earlier, because this is a big part of the work that you do, and I'm really excited to introduce this specifically on the podcast. I don't think anybody's really broken it down for us before.
Okay, so there is the model called Johari window. And before that, I'll just backtrack a bit and spell this out, which is the subconscious, which is approximately 23% of the human cognitive or mental forces, and as well as the psyche, it's the astro-mental plane. Mm-hmm. So there are 4 pillars. One is perception, one is sensing, or what's called sentience, one is intuition or knowing, and one is absolute feeling or emotions. The difference between sentience and emotions are a barometer of your of your needs being met. Sentience is the stimuli that addresses that. Perception is the higher echelon of seeing, and intuition is when wisdom comes after intelligence. I can know the data, but putting it together in art is wisdom. So like these 4 corners or pillars of the subconscious, you have a model which is called the Johari window model. Now it's divided into 4 quadrants, and these quadrants are this is who I am, this is what I think I know, and this is what people also know about me, which is, let's say I'm an engineer and I paint art, and I'm a public speaker and I do a lot for the community. That is, let's say, the first quadrant, which is what you know, as well as what people know about you or the common community. The next quadrant is what you know about yourself, but people may not know about you, which is I love swimming and skydiving, and I'm an adventure junkie or an adrenaline junkie, or I love extreme sport and I like to watch crime movies, for example. And people may not know that about you a lot, or the fact that a I don't know, anything, any example. And that is the second window, which is something that's private, your private spaces, for example. And these are very, very simplistic examples. The third quadrant is what people know about you, but you're not aware about yourself. So, for example, people may see you as somebody who self-isolates, and you may not be aware of that. Yeah. But it is perception, and it's subject to change. All these three quadrants are subject to change. Anything that anyone knows is not a static place. It's like a photograph. If the person grows, the photograph grows or changes with it. It's no longer relevant. The fourth quadrant is that which is unknown to both people as well as you. And this part is closest to emerging at any point of time when the human starts turning inwards to go seeking about themselves. This quadrant, or the unknown, is where you have both chaos, which means anything you can discover, anything can happen. How they say, oh, this event is fated, or I didn't know that would happen. Or it is also your charisma, that when a human being chooses to start turning inwards and make a pivot, it's really to explore and expand their consciousness. That is when charisma increases. Charisma is nothing but the magnetic force of what you're saying being true. That is a lot to do with consciousness. Consciousness is not just knowing. It's a lot of the desire element that a person has to either explore the unknown, or how some people have a calling to go seeking for something. Suddenly they'll make a 70 or 80-degree shift in their life, or do something. And that is them answering a call of the heart or the inside. And that is this unknown, which is also where the magic happens, because chaos is not necessarily good or bad. It is simply a plethora of possibilities that one must tune into, and really pick out the treasured bits that one chooses to be. And that you really, with your own desire to expand your consciousness, you can look at this literally like a window pane, or like the equivalent, a slightly more advanced equivalent of what's a SWOT analysis, for example.
A lot more advanced, yeah, I would say, or a lot deeper at least. Every tool's got its purpose. So why is Johari window, why is that so important? Like practically, how does that work? Should we only be focused on that kind of chaos window, or could we be solely focused on other elements of that window, or other quadrants, if we're looking for something specific perhaps that we're trying to figure out?
So I would perhaps look at it this way. If you had a wheel and you had 4 quadrants, right? Now, let's say the unknown is, and it's a shadow, or it's the part of the room that you haven't looked at yet. Now, let's say you switch the lights on, right? So something when you discover or uncover, whichever the case may be, when you switch on the lights in a certain area, the picture in your inside shifts. Or when you turn the quadrant of the wheel right to have the zenith of the sun on top, then the wheel shifts with it. Yeah. Every time you discover something, your perspective shifts, much like a kaleidoscope. When you look at something and you put it under the spotlight, your awareness expands, and the inside mental images, literally like the juggernaut that we spoke of, the bubble, coming down the hill. It's literally, we start expanding, which is your eureka effect. And that is when, even in the brain, the nerve channels light up. So there's an expansion or an electric effect, which is where your charisma That's the science, some very simplified scientific explanation for why the more you go seeking, the more you have a presence, the more you can bring life to a space, the more you are both seen as well as seen by others. It's actually inside first and then out.
Beautiful. I love that. And that's a framework that anybody can really consider and almost like put themselves in their shoes, perhaps as to where they're playing as well. You know, because a lot of the time we stop at what people know about us and what we know about ourselves, and we I think commonly we adopt the idea that there are certain things that people don't know about us, but then often, not always, but often we stop there. We don't even consider what other people might know about us that we don't know about ourselves. And having the courage to ask is something really interesting, I think. You're probably aware of this with your experience, but the 360 surveys in the workplace that they do with leaders and managers, this really opens that window, doesn't it, to understand, okay, what are other people seeing about me that I don't see? And I think that can sometimes be a catalyst to then dive into the other window or to the other quadrant of the window to say, okay, well, if this is because if these are not aligned, then that begs a question, doesn't it, as to, okay, well, what do I do about that? How can I explore that more? It's just a common example I think our listeners might be able to relate to, should they be in those positions and seeing those kind of surveys and feedback. Is that a solid example?
Yeah, it is. It's also, there's a saying that a hero is usually in latent space until called to engage with himself or herself. And the greatest hero is one who has engaged in battle with self. There's no winning or losing, really. So sometimes when you, let's say, have a 360-degree window or a conversation with a dear friend, really brings up a point to your awareness, which may be painful or not. It's really much like the shedding of an outer layer. So depending on the level of resistance, it may or may not be painful, depending on the resonance of truth you feel. The thing is, the human must emerge from the subconscious, much like trees grow. It's a law of nature. So when a person does not seek, then the underground comes out anyways. When a person seeks, it's literally like weeding the garden on the inside first. There's no right or wrong. When you find it, it will come, whether it's a 360-degree feedback, or sometimes, kids can say the hardest things to their parents. Sometimes we are taken aback in relationships and we say, but I can't believe you felt this way about me. The thing is, if you're not watching yourself, or those 100 times when you decided to say, okay, it doesn't matter, I'll take the space for granted. And there's no wrong or right. It's literally when the desire drives you that you can be you can overshoot or ride rough. And you'll have to always check what you desire. Is it in harmony with self first? And if it is, then you have a lot more of others buy-in, because that's how consciousness works. And in which case, your aspect of the 360-degree really throwing up surprises or awareness, or the cause of checking, it is either you get pulled to it, or you weed the gardens internally from time to time, simply as a symptom of health and not a cause.
Yeah.
If I feel that I'm getting angry today, and I'm used to good health, then I'll sit with myself and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
Take it easy. This is perhaps not acceptable in the long term. It's okay, but not so much. Whereas if I forget to fix the fact that I hurt, let's say my cat, some days I'll get very irritated if she's following me around and I'm doing tasks at home. For want of a very simplistic example, but the genuine affection is, will you please get out of my way? And I don't want to offend her feelings, believe it or not, however silly this may sound. And then there are days when I'll be really sad because That's all I really want to make me feel happy in spaces. So what you'll have to excuse the very, very oversimplified childish example, but it's in these moments when there is affection around us, and as humans, we don't stop to receive exactly that which we are chasing in the false space.
Yeah.
What I want in terms of affection is to be seen and appreciated. And at work, when you want to achieve a goal of opening and running a department worth $100 billion, but you have friends from school who you can sit with and say, I think you need to take it easy. You perhaps need to be more at home, for example. And those are the moments where you're seen way more than the part which you're showing to the public in the Johari window, but they don't know what's going on with the real you. Yeah. Those are the dynamic aspects that we're speaking about.
Yeah, and that makes sense. You mentioned like the resistance, and sometimes being in that kind of chaos quadrant, there can be resistance to that, or even resistance when somebody might be revealing something or seeing you, truly seeing you, and seeing something that you haven't seen for yourself. That resistance often comes with a side order of fear. For a lot of people, me included. I'm a lot more, I think, courageous and brave to lean into the unknown a bit more, particularly around myself over the years. But I know this is still a very prevalent challenge for a lot of people. They are seekers. They might be listening to this podcast because they're on the cusp of something, but there's just maybe something that's holding back. Do they need to almost wait for this sense of desire to be enhanced even more, or is there another line of approaching this?
So the thing is that there are two aspects to this, and one is, I'll start with the one that's perhaps more known, and I'll keep it really simple with that, is that what you resist persists, what you accept transforms. It's quite commonly heard, maybe in my field, I'm not sure, maybe in yours, but it is not unknown of. So that which you resist, that the longer you turn your attention to it in opposition, the equal and opposite is the momentum from the other side. And the more people fixate on something that's bothering them, the more it will bother them in turn. For example, why has the carpenter not yet come? I need this fixed. It's bothering me, for example. Now, coming to the second part, fear-based resistance, fear-based emotions are always, the core emotion is fear, which is fear that a particular need or a requirement will not be met. In these, when it's not reached existential proportion, the fear that is, turns into irritability, annoyance, resistance, grief, depression, anger, rage. Depression is rage internalized itself. Ultimately, that's, if you don't have permission to express it outside, then it turns inside. So when there is resistance, when, let's say, I tell a person, I think you need to if you are in a certain project, like a project manager role, and you've got people who you need to harness into doing something, then you tell the person, I think you need to let them do their bit and take a step back. You're not wrong or right. If they wish to not achieve the goal in the desired target, then you need to let them drop the cap. But the person says, but I'm responsible. Sorry, this is the team. This is how it is. And you say, no, but you've got to let it go because you are putting yourself through pain. And there you see the resistance, the fear of dropping what was their identity. I am a perfect project finisher, right? Now, the project finisher never works alone. This identity is what also is their prop. If I'm perfect at my job, then everywhere else that I'm aware of the ill health can be put or pinned on this as my weighted average is perfectly okay. The weighted average is independent of your task-based identity. The weighted average is absolutely oneness with the energy that you carry, whatever you do. If you are unhappy at work being a CEO or a finance director, then you are going to be task precise, relationship at the far end of the polar extreme.
Yeah.
In these spaces, the resistance to acknowledge that what you have created as your identity and that same thing has carried you through the toughest times possible, to question that building structure is terrifying for some, for whom that's the only pillar of their house that they function with. The thing is, you can't function only with being a particular identity, especially if it is task-based, as that is unhealthy relationship with self, focus elsewhere.
Yeah.
Similarly, the resistance terrifies people. It's literally the freeze aspect, and they get angry or stubborn or rebellious. Also, the don't think of a blue ball thing, but I am never going to do this, or that is rubbish. Then it goes into denial, it goes into treason. The treason is ultimately with self. It goes into deceit of self-worth. Because when you say, no, that's not true, it's probably because the bell has rung harder on the inside. And that is painful. There is no right or wrong. It's like an animal that runs away. We all do it. When I know that I need to change something that I do not wish to change, or turn the page on a chapter of a book where my heart is still engaged, I will procrastinate. I will say, no, perhaps I'm wrong. And that is also delusion to self to a certain extent, a minute extent. So resistance is pain. But the thing is that the longer you sit with those pain parts, the longer the time you're spending, the stiffer the spine, so to speak, as an allegory. So what we ask somebody is, when they're sitting in a job where they've been unhappy for 6 months, a year, we say, okay, what stops you from changing? I don't want to do this. I don't know if I'm going to get a job somewhere else. I don't know if I'm going to be acknowledged or get a payroll somewhere else. I promised my wife I'd buy her another car, or something like that. I've got to send my kids to college. So we ask them, okay, what do you want to change about this? I don't think I can change this. I don't know what to do. I don't know. You tell me. But what do you want to change? How can I tell you what to do if you don't want to change anything? No, I have to do something. That is where you know that until they are willing to make the shift from the inside, then it is, I don't know, what should I do? Should I stay or should I go? So we ask them, are you willing to stay in the same space for the next 3 years? And that's the biggest thing to wake somebody up. You have to wake up to make the shift, which is no more. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be small, with case in point, if you have the finance manager, where you tell them, I'm not going back there again, to them. Yeah. They report into me. I will send the messages. I will do a perfect job of being true to my value, my identity. I need to just make a slight modification. So break it down into smaller spaces, break it into a modification, and be more responsive rather than react and go into an all or nothing. I can't leave the job. Okay, don't leave, but what are you willing to shift? You can't go into there's nothing possible. Yeah. That is fear-based resistance, which is the hardest to crack. Unfortunately, that also causes the maximum grief.
Yeah. And that's typically what we see, that kind of resistance when it comes to burnout. A lot of people that burn out, there's been something that they've been resisting, and it's different for everybody. Like, everyone's got obviously their unique precursors to burnout, really. But it's something sprung to mind as you were speaking there about, like, the CEO. Typically, a lot of CEOs are able to stay well in the high pressure when they have a lot of other things going on outside of their identity as a CEO. When they have those other avenues, whether it be family, whether it be their hobbies and things like that, that really helps. And obviously there is a danger there that they're still seeking that or seeking or reinforcing that sense of identity, just misplacing it or displacing it somewhere else now. But actually, so long as that's coming from their internal core values, it seems to really help reignite that energy. And then they are actually like, do you know what, I could leave actually being a CEO, that would be okay for me. Or they suddenly find out where they've zoomed out and perhaps their energy bubble's expanded more and more, is they're like, okay, no, actually, this is the way I'm perceiving this whole scenario is not what I thought it was. And it becomes this small thing rather than this big, like chaotic problem that they thought that they once had.
Correct. There's this very common thing. I mean, how many balls do you juggle in the air? We turn that around and we say, how many pillars is your house built on? One is work, one is you. A big part is you. It's polar opposite to work. There's no family or friends to jog you along in those spaces. You are the little drop in the ocean at work. Your work ocean may be humongous, but when you come home, you are equally humongous in terms of weighted space for what gives your space, your world, your home, your whole aspect of balance is also you. You want to achieve all these things for you. Where are you sitting in the hub or the center point of yourself? Are you seated in self to be able to say, okay, I'm pushing myself to something that's not real? How much is enough for me? What do I want to achieve by this? So in that, when you stop putting a frantic goal post to some token measure of achievement to identify as worth, and thereby you're really not sitting on your own chair, for want of a better way to say this, then you are not sitting in the main pillar opposite to, let's say, work, which is yourself. And one can extrapolate that with family and friends and siblings and health and everything else and finance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. There's an activity that we do where we'll have somebody look at a certain situation or maybe a problem in their life often, and they sit in different positions. They literally will sit in a different part of the room on different chairs, and they often recognize that it's not their chair that they're sitting in. And it's often like the chair of, well, everybody knows this about me. Like the first quadrant that you described is actually, this is what people know about me. And this is what I know about myself. And they are looking at everything through that lens and that lens alone. And then they move into perhaps the next quadrant. We don't talk about it in the same way, but just to kind of bring this back to what you're saying. And then it's this discovery period, and they go to the next and to the next. And sometimes they realize that they're actually sitting in a chair that their mum put there for them, and they're looking through the lens of perhaps their parents. And this is what one of the contributors to creating this life, because they're not sitting in their sense of self, and in their essence, really. I find this fascinating, Jyotsna. I really do. I'm very mindful of time. I can't believe how much time has passed, and I want to be respectful of yours. You have such a wonderful way of teaching and explaining. It's a real gift. It really is, and I'm really honoured to have you on the show, and for our listeners to come and meet you and find the work that you do, and all of the links to obviously where our listeners can find you will all be in the show notes to this podcast. But before we say our goodbyes, is there anything else? And I know this is a big open question, especially for you. Is there anything else that you feel that our listeners perhaps need to hear, or that you feel called to share as we wrap up?
There's so much that's been said. I really don't know, to be honest, for all the verbal capacity we've engaged with so far. I'm a little wordless, but I can perhaps say just heart conscious living.
Yeah, I love that. What a way to end the show. Listen, Jyotsna, I love you. I really love your energy. I love everything about you. So thank you so much for your time and energy today. And no doubt our audience now, listeners, will come and find you. I know I'm going to be like doubling down more on what it is you do, and really leaning into your work even more after this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It was really It was really a pleasure to be here, and I'm very, very appreciative of the invite to speak here. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
Please share it with a friend who you think might benefit.
Spread the word. That's how we're going to impact the world, by helping each other.
We appreciate you so much, and as always, unconditional love and wellness to you.